Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be able to bring to you this new initiative from Jkpi. We are thrilled to embark on this new journey and only hope that you would enjoy the learning experience that we have put together. I'm Jigyasa Kuladi, a research fellow with Jkpi. On behalf of the entire team of Jkpi, today I welcome you all. The Expert Talk series is a special initiative of the Jammu and Kashmir Policy Institute where we seek to source inputs and recommendations from experts in various fields pertaining to different sustainable development goals through one-on-one dialogue with various experts. As an organization, JKPI believes in multi-stakeholder dialogues as one of the most important components in building a shared vision for development in Kashmir and true to our faith in the same. We have initiated the series to engage experts, change makers, pioneers from various walks of life to understand the dynamic context of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals on our agenda. Today, we begin our dialogue on SDGs 5, Gender Equality. Every week for this 1 month, we seek to host experts who will share with us on the different dimensions of the challenges and possibilities while drawing from their own rich experiences in the field. We believe that personal stories of passionate pursuit of goals, research on addressing gaps, and efforts to be part of the change is very big aspects of development in action at an individual level. We are hopeful that these stories would inspire many people over the following weeks. Without further ado, allow me to now introduce our speaker in the dialogue series on SDG 5, Dr. Ruha Shadab, who would be speaking with us on the topic Gender Equality in Entrepreneurship and Business. Roha Shadab is a doctor turned public health professional turned social entrepreneur. She is the founder of Led by Foundation, a unique leadership incubator that works on improving equity in the workplace. She is a recent graduate from Harvard University, where she received her master's in public policy on a full tuition scholarship. On graduation, she was awarded the Harvard Kennedy School Women's Leadership Award, the first Indian to receive it. During her master's, she served as the co-chair of the India Conference at Harvard, worked at Yale University as first author for a medical ethics paper, and interned at the Gates Foundation on a global health strategy framework. Prior to Harvard, Ruha worked at the Government of India's public policy think tank, Niti Aayog, chaired by Prime Minister. There, she was part of the rollout of the world's largest government health insurance scheme. She has also worked with international health NGOs, the Clinton Health X Initiative, where she prepared the ground for public health intervention for maternal and child health. Ruha is an alumni of Lady Hardinge Medical College, Delhi. She is skilled in strategy, development, project management, and stakeholder engagement. Work cares about market-oriented solutions to accelerate the economy's transition to a more cohesive,
जी हेलो
respectful, and inclusive model
गुड
through
इवनिंग
eliminating entry and retention barriers for underrepresented women. When not working, Ruha can be found running, reading The Economist, or baking. Ma'am, we are really honored to have you here with us to discuss about SDG 5 in entrepreneurship and business. Without taking any further, I would simply like to call you and start asking you a very simple thing that I guess we all are really interested to know. How the idea of Led by Foundation came to you.
Great. Thank you, Jigyasa, so much for having me, and thank you to the J&K Policy Institute. It's always fun to be on talks hosted by really aspirational youth. So thank you again for giving me this platform and for sharing my work and also Led by's journey. That being said, your first question is what was the idea behind Led by, right? So, Led by, for those of you who are new to the platform or are meeting me for the first time, is a leadership lab or a professional leadership incubator for Indian Muslim women. And our goal is to be the catalyst, to be the support ecosystem for college going Muslim women, to make them employable, to help them get their dream job, essentially to make them job ready. And the reason we care so much about this is Indian Muslim women are massively underrepresented in the private sector. We make up 8% of the population, but less than 1% of the private sector workforce. And that's a number that we need to change because if 100 million Muslim women, if 100 million Indians, if 100 million human beings aren't able to achieve their potential, the country is not going to be able to achieve the national indicators that it wants to achieve. and by virtue not achieve the SDG goals that we're actually here to deep dive into, especially SDG 5. And that is honestly the SDG that's perhaps most closely associated with Led By. Now that I've given you a brief about what Led By is, which is a leadership incubator for Indian Muslim women, let me tell you where the idea came from. So as Jigyasa mentioned, I graduated from the Harvard Kennedy School a year back, and I applied for it 3 years back. I'm sorry, I'm just going to remove my face because that's all I can see on my screen. Yeah, now I can see Jigyasa much better. So I applied in 2017 to start my master's program in 2018. And इस master's program को apply करने के लिए you need to do three things. You need to write your essays, you need to take a test, and you need to get letters of recommendation written. And 3 letters of recommendation लिखवाने होते हैं, ठीक है? So, okay, मैंने essays लिखे हैं. My essays were about improving healthcare access for Indian Muslim women. And that mattered to me because abhi tak maine kya kiya tha? I had worked as a doctor, I had practiced in a government setup, in a private healthcare setup, and also worked at an international health NGO, lastly, eventually working for Niti Aayog. So I said healthcare access for Indian Muslim women because इनके healthcare parameters काफी खराब हैं, right? And we need to kind of understand कि क्यों इतने खराब हैं. How can you help solve for these issues? That's what my mentality was. इस पे ऐसे देखा खूब मेहनत करके. Second thing was test देना था, GMAT दे दिया, अच्छे number आ गए. The third was to get letters of recommendation written. Now, in this journey from being a doctor to a public health professional to joining the government, I had fantastic mentors with me. Okay. I went to them, they wrote letters of recommendation. Obviously, अच्छे लिखे होंगे क्योंकि admission हो गया मेरा. But after I got admitted, I managed to get some time to take a step back and really reflect on ये जो 6, 7, 8 महीने की journey थी of preparing for my masters. And I was thinking of ki I want to help this very basic need, right? Healthcare access wali need for Muslim women. Magar uske baad kya, right? What happens when your survivability is ensured? What kind of world are you living in? And that made me think of the 3 letters of recommendation I got written. They were all written by men, none of them women, and hence none of them Muslim women. So it made me start to think about what does representation look like for Indian Muslim women. And in those terms, just hold on 1 second, sorry. I'm going to have to take a quick break. And I'm back. The truth of working from home. So, like I was saying, I was thinking about representation after I took a step back and managed to reflect on who my references were, who my mentors were. And ठीक है, आपने health care provide कर दिया, आपने अब right to education के जरिए you've ensured primary, secondary education as well. What happens after that, right? What is this life that you are providing to people? What kind of dignity does it have? What kind of respect do you have? And that's when Led By started coming to my mind. I'm like, ठीक है, जो औरतें X number of obstacles पार कर देती हैं, जिन्होंने schooling कर दी, जो college तक पहुंच के, उसके बाद क्या? Is there anybody else supporting that journey, especially for Muslim women? Because a very common story here is कि अगर आप ambitious हैं, अगर आप पढ़ाई में आपका ध्यान काफी लगता है, if you have big career goals, you do land up often being the only Indian Muslim woman in your class, in your school, in your office. तो उस जर्नी को ज्यादा सपोर्टिव कैसे बनाएं and how do you ensure कि उस बंदी की आग ना बुझे, right? Who is there who's supporting that? So that is the not short version of how Led By was incepted.
Thank you. And actually, I've touched a lot of things within the entire story of how Ledway came together because not having representation of women and then specifically of Indian Muslim women, because if we see the JNK's Jammu and Kashmir Policy Institute, so when we see the entire scenario in Jammu and Kashmir, we see many women who are very ambitious, but still they are not able to, go for the further story or further studies because of different barriers within society. So You have actually touched upon various things, and healthcare is something I'm going to come later on from here. And while I was researching about like the foundation and you, I guess one thing that came to my head was why entrepreneurship? Why you decided to bring a change by opting for social entrepreneurship? Yeah.
Why did I choose social entrepreneurship as a vehicle for myself? Right? That's the
Yes.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, there are a lot of cool things about being Indian. One of my favorite things about being Indian is also you have such fantastic opportunity to apply your mind to solving social challenges, societal challenges that can improve the lives of millions and address really needs, right? So that's a fantastic opportunity that every young Indian has, which is to take your intelligence, to take your passion, and to solve for a need that will easily affect millions of people. Now, why some disturbance in the background? Yeah, it's me.
Also, kindly mute everyone who is not speaking right now.
I request everyone to proceed with it.
Great.
Yes, Shruva, I think now you can continue. Sorry for the disturbance.
Perfect. Great. Thanks. As for why did we take the social entrepreneurship route for led by is that the problem that we're trying to solve can actually be addressed by creating a solution that so far doesn't exist, right? So why are we talking about women's representation, professional development? ये सब already हो रहा है, but it's not happening for the target group that we are working for. So what makes us unique is कि हमारा जो curriculum है, हमारी जो teachings हैं, हमारे जो mentors का network है, those are all either coached or made attuned to the needs of Indian Muslim women or are just developed keeping the Indian Muslim women in the center. एक एग्जाम्पल मैं देती हूँ कि हमने जो negotiations की workshops करवाई थी अपने fellowship के लिए last year, those were conducted by faculty at the Harvard Kennedy School. And Harvard का एक बहुत ही बड़ा USP है कि वो case study के जरिए पढ़ाते हैं आपको, in which you basically read a 2 to 15 page case, which would tell you a story, and then you come to class and you discuss the story, you tease it out, you answer questions, and that's how you study the concept. And for negotiations, what we did was we actually had two cases written with the Indian Muslim woman as the protagonist. So it was centered around her journey, some real life instances, and then the study, or the session was about, okay, how would you address that situation? So it's really about contextualizing thing. And there wasn't anything addressing that need, which is why we took to social entrepreneurship, right? आपके बाकी के options ही क्या थे? You didn't really have a corporate sex job you could go and join to address the issue of massive underrepresentation of Indian Muslim women. Um, Joining the government was not an option, thus is a much longer route to, yeah, to be able to create any sort of impact. And even just by elimination, the only way to really solve this is by creating a social enterprise that is addressing this need of underrepresentation.
And I believe you have touched a very important point here that what were the other options at the moment? Because even if we see the entire initiative like the foundation, it's very unique, specifically in the context of India. There was no other initiative, if I'm not wrong, because when I was searching, I couldn't find any other initiative at the moment. So I guess it also serves as a sort of self-independence to you, where you are actually looking for and working for your own goal. So, since you have also mentioned, there were no other initiatives, and we also know that there are so many social cultural barriers that are always present within the community itself. So, if I ask you, when you started the entire like a foundation, and specifically now when you have such a big cohort of Muslim women working with you as fellows or as mentors, have you ever faced any sort of social cultural backlash from society in any manner?
That's a really good question. So the first 6 months of Led By's incubation was just me doing two things. Okay? I was doing desk research and I was interviewing slash chatting with people. And a lot of the thinking or advice that I was getting was what about pushback, right? You're doing something for Muslim women, somebody's going to come up and try to be an obstacle in your path. And we spent a lot of time thinking about pushback scenarios, right? अगर ये होगा तो हम क्या करेंगे, वो होगा तो हम क्या करेंगे. But Ledba is now 2 years old, and in this journey, Jigyasa, what's really happened is I've had dozens of people ask me, what about pushback? And I haven't really had anybody come up and say, or give us pushback. And the reason I believe that is happening is that people recognize, yaar, ki there is a need to unlock this potential of 100 million Indians. We are 1.3 billion people. Do you mean to say that aap aur meri need same hai? The reason you don't have access to employment and education is the same reason I don't. Nobody thinks that. People recognize that different communities, and you can bifurcate or define these communities using different tools, right? You can do it linguistically, regionally, based on religion, based on caste, based on class. And if jaise bhi karenge, you'll come up with different root causes of why certain communities have access or don't have access. But you do recognize that even though what the presentation of the problem might be the same, right? Like the symptom might be fever, but the diagnosis will not be the same disease. So the symptom might be a lack of employment or a lack of representation, but us cheez ka diagnosis, us cheez ka cause could be something completely different. It could be more cultural in one issue. It could be more financial in another issue. So to be able to address why is Indian Muslim, or why is the community of Indian Muslim women so underrepresented? What can we do to solve it is what Ledby does. And unsurprisingly, actually, everybody seems to get it. And we've had a large number of supporters. In fact, one really cool thing that happened was हमने 2020 में we started off creating mentors by approaching senior Muslim women who are executives कि अच्छा आइए, this is a platform for you to coach and guide young college girls who are Indian Muslim women. And we got so much interest from allies, from non-Muslims, to be able to come and be a part of this platform to coach minority women. So we now actually have opened up our role model pool from across the community, from across communities, across regions, across religions, which has just been fantastic. And to show that there are allies, there are supporters. Let the world say no to you. You don't say no to yourself. Go out there, put your ask, and you'd be surprised at the number of people willing to support your cause.
Honestly, I feel really good to hear this thing because usually I guess we have so much of myths in our mind that people are gonna have a backlash, or they won't be supporting us. And I believe when I started studying the Jammu and Kashmir, because I'm a postgraduate from the university, and since I wasn't a Muslim, I also had like so many things in my head. But everything just vanished when I studied this. So thank you very much for sharing this thing, because this is a sort of hope, I would say, that actually brings us a good thing, that yes, there's other sides that we need to see. And thank you so much to you for starting this initiative and bring this good side to all of us. And if I simply try to just stretch the previous question, in terms of resources, like getting resources, because as you mentioned, they are very, there were initially a lot of barriers in terms of resources, like in our last discussion. And at the same time, there are very few female entrepreneurs in the field specifically. So, do you ever faced any sort of challenge in terms of getting resources or dealing with sort of the male cohort that is present in the field?
I see two different questions. When you talk about resources, are you talking about our ability to access financial resources? Is that your question?
Yes, exactly. Like in terms of gathering the finance, because for such initiatives, were you able to gather enough resources at the same time?
And the second part of the question is also talking about male allies and if we've been having any concerns with that.
Yeah, because just for example, if you are approaching a male entrepreneur, maybe for a particular resource, like, hey, we are having this initiative and we really want funds for this thing. So, were there any different of opinion in such cases? I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, no, that helps. And to address the resources aspect of that, it has been a lot of hard work to generate fundraising and capital to run our social enterprise. But it always takes work, right? Raising capital either for a nonprofit or through a for profit or for a hybrid model is hard work, regardless of how you're raising capital, whether it's coming through a revenue stream that's non philanthropic or philanthropic. So yeah, we were able to raise capital also because we were incubated at Harvard. So we had a pre-seed grant to start off from there. And after that, being able to show credibility and being able to show results early on has helped us to be able to continue to raise capital, which is going to be an ongoing effort as it is for a nonprofit or an early stage social enterprise. The second part about reaching out to men for help and getting support, I'm going to pause to reflect. I think people have again been really welcoming. They get it. At most, men, women, Muslim, non-Muslim, Indian, non-Indian will want to understand why are we targeting the particular group that we've identified. And it's a very easy case to make, honestly. You just need to see the socioeconomic indicators of Indian Muslim women. It's very clear why something needs to be done for this community. So there really hasn't been any hesitation with supporting us by whatever resources are available at people's disposal, whether they're men or not men.
Thank you, Rohan. I guess I deliberately asked this question just in order to break another myth that usually people have that, you know, the male counterparts, they usually don't support such initiatives, and specifically when it comes to women coming from a particular community. So that's, I guess, this was the reason why I specifically asked this thing, and I just added this part. So thank you very much. And if I'm not wrong, I was going through your website and I came to know that around 4 people in your core team are also male. So if
Yeah.
I just ask you that, how important is the role of male in terms of achieving gender equality and specifically in the entrepreneurial phenomena? So what would you say on that part?
When you talk about diversity, we talk about getting different perspectives to the table. And for that, you need to actively seek out diverse perspectives on your core team. However, with led by, what we've done for our core team is we've just sought out the best talent. Now, when we was trying to seek the best talent, what happened was we ended up getting a women-led team. And this was by no means because we were actively trying to get more women. So it's just the people who lead my ops, the people who lead our tech platform, the people who lead our fellowship program are women, but that's secondary. They were the best fit for the role out of the thousands of applications that we got. That being said, we've had a number of men a part of our core team. We had Manan, Benjamin, Faraz, Yash, and even from these names, you can make out that they are a group of men that represent different countries, represent different communities, represent different regions. And they all bought their technical skill set. One was very sound in corporate finance, one was really sound in particularly Indian investments, one was really sound in strategy, one was really sound in partnerships. So they brought that technical skill, and they also definitely complemented our perspective, which was usually, well, my perspective, which is obviously of a woman. So to be able to have these rich and diverse conversations with even men team members has been fantastic. Wouldn't change it. And I'm so happy that our team looks the way it does purely based on merit. We have more women than men, but it's purely based on merit.
I get this is something, again, I would say again, breaking a barrier because you have all the women who are based on merit. And we have so many debates on this thing that why we usually have more women is basically not because of merit, but because of other reasons. So again, another thing. And if I just move back to your educational background, so because since you had your master's in public policy and you worked in Niti Aayog as well, so if I just uh, stretch the conversation towards a more policy perspective, so where do you see roles of policymakers in terms of providing an enabling environment for women entrepreneurs as well as uh, in providing an environment to create tools for gender equality?
There are three things that come to mind, right? As a policymaker, the most important thing is raising knowledge or awareness about women's entrepreneurship? What does that mean? Is it a viable career option? What does it mean? The second thing is in terms of access to resources and talking about financial resources. A policymaker can definitely make it easier for women-led businesses to get credit, right, or to get loans, to get them at really competitive rates or rates that are easier to match. And the third thing is, and we started talking about this in India, is mentorship. And I know a lot of people get bored the moment the word mentorship is said, but honestly, we might not recognize how many people have mentored us. And we might think of mentorship as being like this artificial slash soft, fluffy word when it's not. If you just pause and think of the last person who gave you advice, right? When you decide, or think about when you were in class 10th, who helped you make that decision ki commerce, humanities, or science then? That was mentorship, right? That was guidance, that was coaching. And that has happened to every one of us 100 times over. But for some, it happens much easier. For some, it happens with mentors that you can relate to. The fact that I didn't see a Muslim woman in any of the roles that I wanted to get to when I was in high school or even in medical school, it does make it sound like a more daunting task, right? Why should I be the first of anything, right? Why have people that I can relate to not have crossed that path? That's because there are a number of obstacles there. And Jigyasa, I'm going to jump questions because there was a question you wanted to ask me, which is behind every successful woman, there is a dash. And I thought
Yeah.
about behind every successful woman, there are a number of unseen obstacles that you don't get to see. Is what there is.
That's so true. That's actually so true. And like a lot of obstacles just make us find more solutions and just develop our own path.
Yeah.
This is something that I guess each and every woman in her life has to go through and come up with her own path and something that she cannot explain to anyone. And like there are many stories that always remains unheard. So
And
salute to
at
every woman.
my age, it's a lot about getting into college, getting into a college in a city that your parents approve of, which your parents consider women appropriate, for instance. Uske baad, it's about where do you get a job? Do you get a job? Are you able to move to another city? That is as far as we can see. Then the real question of timing your pregnancy, having children, taking a break from work, coming back to the workforce not accepting of a woman who's been out of it. So the challenges are so many and are really not talked about as much as they should be. And they need to be talked about not only because they prevent women from being active participants in the economic story, in the growth story of a country, but because the solution is like the solution requires systemic change. That we're talking about a system that is built for men, and women need to fit into that. They're obviously not going to be able to fit into that. We need to create a system that is supportive, encouraging, and works around the needs of women who, mind you, are only doing all of that because that's the way humanity gets sustained.
True. So as you just mentioned about the structural change, I would say because we need to change the system itself because we know it was created by men and all the basic notions are actually somewhere or the other way they're coming from the male perspective. So if I just ask you what we need to do exactly as the first step, something that we all should be doing at a very, I would say, community level. So what are the things that we could do at community level? Because everyone is not a policymaker who can go outside. So, just for the general public, what you would say?
If at an individual level, I tell you what, something took me time also to start doing, which is having difficult conversations and having these conversations with people around you. I'll talk about the religion aspect. Okay. For instance, I distinctly remember when I would take Ubers and have like an awkward conversation with the driver because the driver didn't know I was Muslim. And this is super common, super common. Similarly, having conversations about feminism or what the role of women should be in the economy, or talking about is being a homemaker a choice, having these conversations within my family or with my extended family over things that I'm sure I'm not the only one we've just avoided, right? We're like, rather not talk about it. Let's just talk about how yummy the palak paneer is instead of having these conversations. So having these difficult conversations with your family, having them in the workspace, But also, when we have these conversations, it's come assuming best intentions of the other person also. And let's try to understand where the other person is coming from. I talk about this even when we are trying to build bridges between Muslims and non-Muslims, when we are trying to talk between men and women and any other identifying gender, is to appreciate that, or rather not deny the other person's lived reality, right? Come in accepting कि उनके experiences हैं, and there's truth to that, and then try to share your own experiences, share how, or possibly how we can create solutions to addressing the issues that we've faced in our lives so far. I do have another tiny story to share on that.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. I was there for like the first 8, 10 years of my life. And my family moved back to India when I was in middle school. And I distinctly remember, Jagyasa, that I was getting out of Indira Gandhi Antarashtriya Hawai Adda and being driven back home to Noida. And it was the day of Diwali. And I remember seeing all these houses decked in lights, these kids bursting firecrackers. And the first thing that came to my mind was Rachna, Vrinda, Madhur never celebrated Diwali like this in Saudi. And they were some of my closest friends. And on having these conversations with my parents, I realized how difficult it was for them to follow their religion. I learned about how they had to sneak in calendars, which they would convert to little temples because you couldn't carry idols in the country. And I just felt really bad, sounds sympathetic, but I definitely didn't feel good about any of this situation. But I also recognize that it's so easy to be part of the majority, of which I religious majority ho, class majority ho, linguistic majority ho, to be oblivious to what the minority is going through. So when the majority minority identity for me flipped after coming to India, my reaction was that, okay, the others perhaps don't know what this particular religious identity of mine feels like in India. So that made me come from a place of empathy, a place of communicating. And that's what ended up happening with that, right? We were not afraid to put our ask out there, and we've just only been receiving support from people across.
Thank you for sharing the story, Rova. And definitely, we have seen that there are various marginal communities who are not, at the equal terms with other communities, specifically in terms of having education and the economic respect. And uh, Joe, the story just reminded me of one very good phase of my life that when I was in Jammu and Kashmir. So I remember. Uh, I'm a Hindu, and we used to celebrate each and every festival together, whether it was Eid, whether it was Onam, sorry, that is Onam, Eid, Diwali, Holi. We have celebrated each and everything together. So I guess it's simply about how we have been able to cultivate that space where we all can come together and actually talk about those social issues and even just share the space and just have the togetherness with each other that is more important. And at the same time, I believe that led by foundation is actually, it's not just empowering women, it's actually, changing the vision of everyone, that how we see the world itself, because they, as I just mentioned about the myths, and this is what even I used to be around like 4 years down the line. So completely having a systemic change, I guess this is what is the broader aim of led by foundation. Um, and I don't know, I just get so much into the conversation. Okay, let me just get back to the to some question that I have to go through. I guess one thing that we cannot miss right now is definitely COVID-19. We just cannot skip COVID-19. It has become a part of life. And if I'm not wrong, you just mentioned that Let the Foundation just started just 2 years back. So during a phase when pandemic was just there and grabbing our lives somewhere. So where do you think the impact of COVID-19 specifically for women entrepreneurs, and given the current scenario and its impact, and given the fact that the second wave is also coming up, how do you see post-pandemic era as well?
Yeah, it's actually been a huge bummer, for the lack of a better word. But women entrepreneur, women employees have been most affected by COVID as compared to when you're comparing genders. So you've seen more women lose jobs. You've seen women finding it harder to access credit. And this is, mind you, only working women. There are enough reports to even show that non-working women have had it much harder managing kids at home, having the house completely full. And then there's also the aspect of domestic, physical, sexual abuse that has skyrocketed for women and also for children, which is extremely disturbing. So policies that are being set in motion to be able to kickstart economies should be very, very intentional and cognizant of the fact that women need more of a helping hand because they've been hit worse by COVID.
And if I just ask you that how you see the post-pandemic era when, you know, at least COVID is gone. So where do you see the transition coming up? Do you see that momentum now? Then if I just take your example of Redby Foundation, because we see Redby Foundation is completely virtual. So how do you see the entire scenario? Will it be possible for us to move back again to the physical realm in terms of, coming together and conducting our businesses, or simply having education, and how it's going to impact specifically women in terms of business?
So, in terms of what the world will look like post COVID, it would be a missed opportunity if we don't look at what the efficiencies have been by working virtually, right? It has been helpful to some people more. It's minimized travel time. And I think there are some positives to minimizing travel time. Like, I love the fact that I don't need to walk to the metro station holding a pepper spray in my hand, for instance, right? Again, like something that we do super casually, right? We all have that pen in our hand, or we know where our keys are in our bag. We know exactly what to do, and we're constantly on alert. So there are definitely positive ramifications of getting to work from home. There are some efficiencies, and those should be factored in, at least in the private or corporate space when we go back to work. So, to be able to create more flexibility, to tap into efficiencies, and by the way, flexibility definitely is better for women because they get to manage their day accordingly, right? उनको इतनी rigidly बोलना कि आप 9 to 5 ऑफिस आए and आपके बच्चे उनका देख लेंगे, right? That's very, very hard for women to deal with. So I think those efficiencies should be carried forward. In terms of entrepreneurship for women, it would depend a lot on access to capital. I think at this point, post COVID, we'll just be looking at jobs starting again and people being able to get a monthly income. However, if people are able to set up their own enterprises, because job creation is going to take time, it's going to take time to absorb back everybody who lost their jobs, and then more jobs for the people who are entering the market for the first time. I think entrepreneurship could be a viable option, but it all really comes down to just how much capital there is to be able to set up these enterprises.
Yes, definitely. And I personally believe that entrepreneurship would actually provide a better space for women, specifically in terms of uh, employment when we do not have open employment, specifically in the government sphere that we see nowadays. So, but at the same time, obstacle comes in that you mentioned about the capital part. So I was again going through the website and I was reading about the fellowship program that you have, and there is a very beautiful line that you mentioned that it's about transforming women into leaders. So if I just come to this point, and in terms of your fellowship provides two different skills. One is career development skills, and second is personal development skills. So if you just shed more light on why these two aspects have been put into fellowship and how it's been linked to their development as leaders, because usually we see like uh, women don't make good leaders. So how you relate these two developments skill with leadership and why it is important.
Yeah, I think splitting skills into your professional skills and personal skills is basically quite comprehensive, right? That these are the two buckets that things go into. Now, if you look at within professional skills, that can be split into your technical or your hard skills, and then your soft skills / communication skills. Now, Redby is working more on the communication / leadership skills or your soft skills, because technical skills is something that your college is supposed to be taking care of and you're working for. But that's not enough, right? To be able to stand out, especially standing out in an environment when things are getting automated, when computers are running the show, what sets you apart from that? Your humanness, right? Your ability to communicate, for instance. So, holding those skills to be able to make you a confident leader on the foundation of the technical skill is what we are doing through workshops on negotiations, on adaptive leadership, on growth mindset. So, that's one aspect of our work. The second aspect is personal skills or personal development. And a lot of this has to do with you having a supportive ecosystem. So at Led By, we are also providing you a network of like-minded, ambitious Indian Muslim women whom you can share your journey with, who you can tap into when the going gets rough or tough, and then also mentors and senior advisors from industries that you're interested in. And what all of that helps with Jigyasa is we are sharing power and privileges, right? These senior women executives from across regions, religions are now saying, hey, I've had the mantle, I've had this space on this stage, and now it's time that I give up my space for women who've been underrepresented so far. In this case, we're talking about Indian Muslim women. So that's how we're doing both things. We're doing professional skills, especially with a focus on soft skills, your leadership skills to help you get that job. And the second thing is with a personal ecosystem, by making sure you stay in that job because you have the supportive ecosystem to continue this journey, which is much harder for women, much harder for Muslim women.
Okay. Sorry, we had just some glitch in the technical point. So, because we are just heading towards the Q&A session because it's already 46, so not wasting much time, I'm just going to ask you one last thing that I guess I'm somewhere you're aware of. So, um, as you have come to a lot of things from public health now, finally to social entrepreneurship. So, if I just ask you to give yourself one advice, your younger self, say 20 years old. So, what advice would that be? And just keeping it in a broader perspective of giving this advice to a younger woman of yourself. So, what that advice would be.
I don't necessarily have any regrets. So I guess I would tell my younger self, keep at it. And that might also be the thing I would say to other younger people at this point. Um, Dreaming big is really important. And that is one thing that I do share with folks who reach out to me because uske aage kuch bhi bolna, right? Go get your dreams, go um, achieve things, apply to bigger colleges, etc. is are things that come with having certain amount of privilege, having access to some money, to some resources. But dreaming big is really step zero, right? At least envisioning what you want in life and envisioning something big is something that everybody can do. And that's what I would want to say to the youth. God, I'm saying to the youth as if I'm really old, but that does make me feel old.
I guess it's more about having inspiration from you because we always look forward to, those role models that we have. And I know I personally follow Leper Foundation, and last I took one of the session by Leper Foundation as well. It wasn't design thinking. Yes, it wasn't design thinking. So I'm also, somewhere taking advantage of your foundation. So thank you very much for that. And I don't think that I can end questions because I still have a lot of questions. But right now, I guess we have to open floor for other people. So I'm just gonna ask my colleague Tosif to just send me all the questions that you have curated from various platforms. So we're
As
gonna.
Tausif is doing that, you can pause me whenever the questions come in. But I also wanted to spend some time just talking about SDG 5. But you tell me, Jigyasa, should I talk about that or have the question already reached you?
So they're still reaching us because he's just collecting it from various platforms. So yes, actually, it's a good idea. Why don't we just talk about gender equality right now?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of you might have been reading the news about the WEF report on gender gap that came out a couple of days ago, right?
Yeah,
And
what they call me forums.
yes, World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report of 2021. And India is at 140 out of 156 countries right now. That
Yeah,
is not
third
place to
worst
be. And
former in South Asia.
yeah, and it's not a good place to be, especially considering we have dropped ranks over here. But let's just take a step back. Okay, so this gender gap, how do we even calculate it? It's calculated based on four things. It's calculated based on your economic participation. It's calculated based on your educational attainment. It's calculated also based off your health and survivability, and then political participation. Globally, क्या हुआ है कि education and health, we've actually managed to bridge the gap between the genders. It's really between political participation and employment that we are seeing a gender gap to continue to exist and not be close to bridging the way we want it to be bridged. I think globally we are going to take 135 years to get to a place without gender disparity on these four parameters. And India, it's going to be 265 years. So definitely a lot of work needs to be done, considering we want to achieve this by 2030, right? That's the SDG ka target. There is a silver lining though. We've actually seen that in India, our enrollment numbers are really good. And actually, when you look at the gender gap report, India ranks somewhere among the top when you look at this particular parameter of educational attainment and educational enrollment, which is why led by focuses on college and on the employment. कि हमारा यही मतलब है कि अगर आप schooling करवा दिया, but what about after that, right? And we haven't really started thinking about after that on a policy term, on a large scale term. And that's what led by does, and that's how it actually ties into SDG. It's really about looking at the employability slash employment of women, and in our case, Indian Muslim women.
And just giving a little background to our audience about what we have just talked about, is one recent report from World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2021 that shows that India has slipped 28 places to rank 140, which is the third worst performer in South Asia. And at the global level, World Economic Forum's report states that the gap has seen marginal improvement since 2020, and as a result, it estimates that it will take another 267.6 years to close the gap. And there's one very interesting stat that we have is from IMF that equal participation of women in the workforce will increase India's GDP by 27%. So 27%, and it's not just like it's going to take much effort. What we simply need is to provide them the equal platform that we are not providing. For example, there are many reports that states that women do not have equal wage in India, and this is the point where we actually see Ledbetter Foundation coming in which, because definitely Ledbetter Foundation is providing us with various measures to achieve SDG 5. At the same time, it's also looking at SDG 4, that is quality education, because it provides mentorship as well as skill trainings. And on the other hand, it's preparing young women to have that work opportunity that they have always been willing to have. So it comes again to SDG 8, that is decent work. So this is a broader perspective that is coming together for Ledwell Foundation, and uh, I guess this is something that I have always been saying from the very beginning of the Aspecto series is that there could be no other person better than having Dr. Ruha on our very first series, because you have specifically target that one particular community that has not been a part of major initiatives, specifically in terms of providing education and employment. And since our entire initiative is focused on SDG and it's a Jammu and Kashmir Policy Institute, a major chunk of audience coming from Jammu and Kashmir, where we see that society is really conservative. So you are a true inspiration, and your initiative is something that is directly beneficial to the entire community. So thank you very much for sharing your experience today with us. And we have just 7 minutes exactly. So, and I have like so many questions. So, before I actually proceed with questions, okay, uh, I'm really sorry, but this is sort of a privilege that I have to provide. Our director, Ms. Sohini Jana, has one question. So, I'm gonna open the floor to her before I dwell into other questions. So, uh, Sohini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Agasa. Thank you, Dr. Ruha, for sharing your journey with us and for letting us know what it takes to actually dream big and also follow suit. Because a lot of us do dream big, but it's just not up to everyone to just take the next step. So having said that, because we are a think tank based out of Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir, I had one question based on faith-based teachings or faith-based guidance that could have supported women's leadership, particularly Indian Muslim women's leadership. So because you've identified a community which is a faith-based community of women, so I would like you to let us know and share with our audience. I'm sure a lot of young Muslim women are joining us live. So if you would want to take a cue from your faith tradition and from your faith community and how you've been raised as a young Muslim woman, what would you say has inspired you from your faith tradition to take on the path of leadership and to blaze your own trail as you already are doing. So we'd love to hear a little bit about that. Thank you.
There are a lot of things that can be said about how empowering Islam was for women when it first was propagated amongst humankind. Everything in terms of land rights, property rights, that inheritance that was spoken for or spoken about for women. I don't think that has a direct bearing on me. It's not as if in my childhood my parents quoted that and were like, "Here, this is why we want you to get educated." The way I look at it is, it definitely wasn't a hindrance. It was being raised in a family in which education and employment were valued was kind of the reason why we made it here. By we, I mean me, my cousins, my brothers, my siblings. So I find it hard to say that if there was something I can dive into my faith which had a direct relation, I feel like even if I try to place myself in my Hindu friend's head and try to think of something, I wonder what they would say, right? It's not a direct relation. So I'm sorry I'm not able to answer your question satisfactorily.
The reason I asked this question, Ruha, is because while working in Kashmir and engaging with a lot of Muslim women here, a lot of I've always seen that the element of agency, will, and the power to actually work on your dreams has a lot to do with how the community identifies with what you should be doing, your role. And there are times when religious interpretations are provided in order to not allow a woman to proceed. Like, this is just observations from a lot of women I have spoken to so far. I will obviously say that it's not all, but like you rightly mentioned, that Indian Muslim women, there's a lot of gap to cover. There's a lot of ground to cover to actually empower them and bring them into the workforce. So there must be some hindrance coming from the way culture is, aiding or inhibiting the way they are able to exercise their will and actually take a decision. So any comments on that?
Definitely. I think when the word that you mentioned, culture, right, that's important. If you look at Muslim women, I mean, look at Muslim women in Spain, look at Muslim women in Turkey, right? Look at Muslim women in America, and their sense of agency, their prioritization of education and getting a job is very different than what it is like for Muslim women in India. So that's why it's really hard for me to draw a direct line to religion in terms of what's happening with education and employment for Muslim women in our country. But there is definitely a mix of things that's happening in terms of culture, in terms of our own unique history as Muslims within India. And there has been an issue where we haven't prioritized education and employment, and that needs to be changed. A lot of that can be changed by, in the short term, 5 to 7 years, if we can start getting more Muslim women in mid-level executive roles and make them role models, raise their visibility, that might start creating a sense of agency. What is agency? Agency is your belief that if I do action A, result B will happen. And it's super easy to say that will happen if I've seen somebody do it, right? If I said, okay, Sohini went and did her MBBS, then did step B, and now she is WHO key director. So that's the path I need to follow. And that's a way that I'm getting a sense of agency. So to be able to create that by creating more role models and simultaneously raising their visibility is a way to address the stagnation of education and employment. And the reason I'm bringing it back to India at large, when we're talking about Indian Muslim women, is look at our female labor force participation rate. It is the number of working age women who are actually working, right? And that number has decreased over the past decade. And there's something very fundamentally wrong if that is happening with us. And we need to understand why we are one of the dozen countries that have seen a reduction in female labor force participation rate. So all of that compounds together, and there are quite a few variables. But the solution is, one of the short-term solutions would be, rather quicker solutions would be, to focus on people who are about to enter the workspace and provide them the tools and resources to get the job that they want and climb up the ladder soon enough to be visible role models.
Thank you, Ruha. Jigyasa, over to you for the questions.
Um, Thank you, Soiniti. And since it's already 9, so I don't think we can take up questions because we have a schedule for live streaming. But we have like 3 questions in the list at the very moment, so maybe we can take like one if possible. So, this question is basically about the technological advancement that is coming in the field and how it's gonna impact the participation of women in the workforce. Yeah, that's exactly the question. So, the technological advancement and its impact on women's participation in the workforce.
I would imagine that that question needs to be broken down in what kind of technological advancements are happening and what kind of jobs are they affecting. And then you look at the jobs that are getting affected the most. Are they mostly held by men or by women? Those are numbers that I don't have on me right now, but happy to follow up over email or with whomever has asked that. Talking
Actually,
about it more broadly, however, I found this really interesting analogy. I think it was written in The Economist about how when cars were invented, horse riders slash carriage riders were worried about losing their jobs. And we kind of figured out a way. So similarly, even with automation, we will figure out what the new set of jobs looks like. But at the same time, there needs to be a conversation around creating a social safety net that really covers a very large percentage, if not the entire population, as we see people getting out of jobs at very, very large numbers. But the exact correlation, I think, is something that I'm sure somebody's written a pretty fantastic research paper on.
yeah, and I'm really sorry that we do not have the name of the person because if I'm not wrong, this question is actually taken from Facebook. Yes, it's taken from Facebook, so we don't have the name, and it's a very broad question. And I believe we cannot take any further question at the moment because it's only 9:02. So I would simply ask everyone who have their questions. We have noted out your names already now, and if you have any further questions, do send us your email as well so that we can just compile all the questions and send it to Ruha, and then get back with all the answers and just mail it to you. And with this, I believe I can.
Okay, so there's one thing I do want to share is, first of all, please send your questions. You can send them directly to me. My email ID is ruha@thedby.org. Super easy. Ruha@thedby.org. Apart from that, if you are also an ally or supporter of getting more Indians in the workforce and making them more employable, we also have a super structured yet simple 1 month volunteership program. The advantage of this volunteership program is you get to really work on a very, very high impact part of our programming. And at the same time, we also provide professional development and feedback guidance to our volunteers. So it helps you in improving yourself while also contributing to our mission of raising the representation of Muslim women in the private sector. To learn more about that, just go to ledby.org and you can look at the Join Us button. So it's ledby.org, and the Join Us button will tell you more about this volunteer program.
It's actually wonderful. I guess I'm gonna go and check it as well. And for everyone, we have shared the link of Ledbetter Foundation, and in our upcoming post, you will see the link of Ledbetter Foundation as well as of pages of Dr. Rupa as well. So do not forget to just go to the website and check all the opportunities because they have various programs that you can actually look for. And we really apologize for not being able to take up all your questions because of shortage of time. And again, I thank Dr. Roha. And now I just welcome Javed sir. And I'm going to give the floor to him to give a small word of thanks. So over to you,
Hello,
Javed sir.
hello. Adab, everyone. Jkpi is grateful to Dr. Ruha Shadab, our guest this evening. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us. It has been a great pleasure. Jkpi is blessed and fortunate enough to have a dedicated and motivated team, so who have made this event successful. My sincere thanks to them. And last but not least, we are also thankful to our audience who remained with us this last 1 hour. So, looking forward to seeing you all at our future events. Good night.
Thank you, Javed sir. And with this,